Well, it's a little bare today. I wonder where everybody is. Well, no problem. Um, Thank you for coming. Those of especially, it's that much more meaningful that you're here today. So I'm going to be talking about letting go of our fear of being used by God. So this word "being used" is kind of a loaded word, I think. Most people, I think it's pretty universal, we don't like the feeling of being used, right? I think that most people have some experience in their life where they felt that they were used by somebody, or they were used by something, and they felt that, maybe you felt that because of that experience you were left depleted or lacking, or it benefited the other person but did not benefit me. In fact, left me with less. And I think that those kind of experiences are generally pretty painful, and they often happen with people that we trust or people that we're close to, close family members, maybe a boss at work or something like that. And so I think it's universally considered to be kind of a painful or a bad experience. So, but oftentimes we use this. We kind of talk about this concept of letting God use us, or being God's hands and feet, or being useful, right? It kind of stands in a little bit of a contrast or a dichotomy. These are things that we consider to be good, but at the same time, we are very challenged with the idea of being used in a way that, in a way that most of us have experienced in our life in reality. Even in simple conversations, sometimes we walk away from a conversation feeling kind of gross, right? Like maybe you were talking with the person and that person just vented their frustrations and their things that they didn't like, and it wasn't really a conversation. Like, it was just them talking to you or at you, and then hoping that you could just absorb the things that they were saying. Or I even have sometimes conversations where I'm like, I have to be really careful because the person, I have to be careful about what I say, because I know that person may use what I say against me later on. These are really sad kind of conversations. But it just highlights the reality that even in simply speaking with one another, we can have all kinds of experiences. And unfortunately, human beings, we use one another a lot. This happens a lot in the world. And I believe each person here probably has some experience that maybe you're thinking about now, or experiences where you felt that you were taken advantage of. So when we talk about being used by God, it's natural that these feelings will come up. Even though there's a big difference between the idea of being used by God and being used by others, there's some similarities, enough similarity that it's very hard to separate the two completely. When I was, I used to do this program called Landmark many years ago. It's probably like a decade ago now. And Landmark was a really cool experience for me. And if you don't know anything about it, it's kind of like an intense 2 or 3 days where you go, and of course there's follow-through coaching and things, but they really get into the nitty-gritty of what is your, like, why do you live the way you live right now? And going into your past and the things that you did and the experiences that you had. And it was like maybe 10 years ago for me, and I don't remember a lot of what I experienced back then, but there was one guy that I remember so vividly. He was another participant just like me, and he was huge. Like, he had huge muscles, right? Huge muscles, tight t-shirt, that kind of, and he kind of had this attitude like, yeah, don't mess with me. And through the process of the seminar, I don't remember how it happened, but he kind of had very strong opinions. And it ended up getting into some one-on-one conversations with the leader of the seminar, which was common. That's what they encouraged. And I don't know how it happened, but just somehow in the process, it came out, she said, you must have had some really, traumatic experiences in your life. And he's like, yeah. He's like, I was molested when I was a kid. And, it was a very, open conversation. I think that's part of the reason why I really remember it. Because, usually in life, we don't delve into that kind of stuff. But, in the conversation, he was saying about how she was kind of unearthing that for him, because that happened to him, because somebody took advantage of him, he made the decision early on in his life, I'm never going to let anybody do that to me ever again. So he worked out, and he became this kind of such an intimidating person that, probably no one ever did mess with him again. He probably did a really good job of that. But it stuck with me so strongly how much this experience, really in so many ways determined the kind of emphasis or priorities of what he chose to invest into his life from that point on. And how much, even just one experience of being taken advantage of, can have such a drastic effect on a person. So these experiences of being used by people, like I said, is so drastically different than, in my experience and my understanding of what it means to be used by God. It's so different. And I think the biggest reason for that is because when we are in a position to be used by God, there's love there. God cares for his children. If God is going to use us, it's not going to be because he wants to use us and throw us away. It's not because God is going to abandon us or take something from us without giving something to us of equal or greater value. And I think that that's something that's really important for us to remember, because we don't experience that in our day-to-day life so much. Of course, I hope each one of you has genuine good people in your life that will never try to take from you. Or if there is an opportunity to give, they will try to reciprocate, right? Those are kind of people we need in our life. But the reality is, we know life isn't always like that. But we know that God is not like that. And the Bible talks a lot about it. If you look up the Bible and you talk about God's promises, if you look for God's, God will not forsake you or will not abandon you, will find many references where God talks about this in the Bible. Here's just a couple examples. This one's from Deuteronomy. The Lord your God will personally go ahead of you. He will never fail you or abandon you. And this is from Joshua. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. And this is a quote from our founder. He said, "Never worry when some difficulty comes to you. Just pay attention to the next step. The difficulty could defeat you, or it could resurrect you to the highest possible level under the circumstances. You must remain confident that as long as you are one with God, he will never abandon you." Your situation may seem bad, and it may be bad, but the moment that you can go over the difficulty, then it will benefit the side of goodness to an equivalent degree. This kind of reminds me of something I was reflecting on earlier this week, was that there's many people who say that, I believe in God, God loves me, and these kind of things. But I wonder how many people really in the world wish to be useful to God, wish to be used by God in some way. Because that really involves some level of surrender. It involves some level of letting go of maybe the plans that I have for my life and the things that I think should be and the way I think things should go. It involves letting go a little bit of control. And the reality is that belief doesn't necessarily require us to do that. That's why we make such a distinction between what is a life of faith and what is a religious belief. Because having a belief doesn't necessarily mean that we need to follow God's path in our life. It doesn't mean we have to change. I have to change myself. Not having a window makes a big difference, doesn't it? And I think that it's something that I feel sad for God in some ways, because I feel like so many ways in which God works in history and in our lives and in providence, it's like we don't even know what God is doing. We're not even aware many times, how God is working in my life or how God is working in this world. Many times God is just working in the background. He's working with people who don't even acknowledge that God is there. And I mean, that's amazing that God can do that, but also how much more powerful could it be with the people who believe in God and the people who have been touched by God in our lives we also want to be useful to God. We also want to be used by God. We want to return that love that God planted in our hearts that allows us to all be here today, in some way return back to Him. And I think that it's because we have fear many times, that if we put our trust in God and we take a leap of faith, then we will end up losing. I think that this is a reality that we have to confront and face in our own lives as people of faith. That maybe because of my own personal experiences or because of the people in my life that I know and love, I'm afraid that if I did put my faith in God, that I will end up with less, or I will end up maybe at a destination in my life that I'm not happy with. I think that's fair. I think that if it was easy to let go of control, if it was easy to put faith in God, everybody would be doing it. If it was for sure that the outcome was going to be what we wanted, then it would be easy. And we look at situations like Jesus on the cross, somebody like Jesus shouldn't have had to end up on the cross. And even on the cross, he's like, my God, why have you forsaken me? Who wants to end up in a situation in their life where they gave their whole life to God and have to utter those words? It's beyond difficult to digest that kind of a thing. And even in our own faith, even in our own church, we look at our founders and their family and the situation of our church, and we never would have thought that things would be this way. Some things have gone well, and there's many things that we can look at and we can point at that are not inspiring of confidence. Maybe not things that we're happy turned out the way that they did. So that's all to say these are fair. These are real. And but we can't ignore them. We can't just act like, we can't just not try to have trust in God, but we also can't just ignore it either. It's really an important part of a life of faith. I know that for myself, being here for almost 9 years now as pastors, this is not how I envisioned that things were going to go. So many things were not what I expected to be. And I've shared about this before, but especially in the areas of the renovation work. I never thought that I would be, devoting so much time and energy to fixing things and fixing houses and all the things that come to that. And sometimes if I let my mind wander, I think to myself, I'm a pretty handy person with computers. If you go into the IT field, you can easily make $100 an hour. You can easily make really good money in the IT field. And I'm thinking to myself, I could be making a lot more money if I worked in the IT field. That's really tempting because there's never enough money, right? Or we could be living in the countryside, instead of living in the middle of this city. And I didn't sleep well last night, but I could have sworn I heard a bunch of gunshots. But I also don't know if that was. Sometimes I mistake it for like people running over potholes and things like that, because sometimes at night it's hard to tell. But sometimes I miss the peace and the balance of being in the country and being in nature, even though myself I'm not really a nature person. But at the same time, when I look at the last 8 years and I think about all the ways in which it's touched my family and the people that we've met and the lives that we've been able to touch, and the impact that it's had on our family and even on my own personal life of faith, I'm in awe. These are things that I could never have traded money for, or even peace and tranquility. That's a little bit harder, but these are not things I could have traded for that. And I feel these are things that have come directly from being able to take that leap of faith. And life is short, life is long, depending on how you look at it. And I don't know how things how things will progress in years to come. Some things will probably go the way we hope that they will go, and many things probably won't. And there will be regrets, and there will be things to be proud of. But I'm reminded of this verse. Should the thing that was created say to the one who created it, "Why have you made me like this?" When a potter makes jars out of clay, doesn't he have a right to use the same lump of clay to make one jar for decoration and another to throw garbage into? Funny, I was at Costco last week and just minding my business. And I ran into Jude, who some of you may know. He's the pastor at Confluence Ministries. They usually host the West Colfax Cleanup and the Neighborhood Festival. He's a really nice guy. If you ever haven't met him, he's a good guy. Anyway, I'm down at Costco on Santa Fe, and last person I expect to see is Jude. But here I am walking down the hall, and Jude comes running up to me, and I'm like, "Oh, hey, what a unexpected surprise. Nice to see you." And I thought that was it. But he was like, "Hey, you're strong, right?" And I'm like, "Sure, I guess. Like, can you please come help me move this big, what do you call it? It was a grill that he was buying, but he couldn't get it onto the cart himself. So I went over there and I helped him pick up the grill. And this, I don't know, that sounds like a really simple story, but for me, I was like shocked. I was like, that's the last thing I was expecting to be helping him with his project or his, because I feel like I end up doing that a lot, every day almost. I'm doing a lot of facilitating, helping to make this happen, helping to make that happen, which is really wonderful, but it's not what I envisioned. It's not what I expected, becoming a pastor. I don't think it's what anybody would expect. That being said, being able to help other people to accomplish things maybe is something to consider, maybe more valuable than me personally accomplishing things for myself. Maybe there's value in being a person that can enable other people to accomplish more than what I could do by myself. These are things that I have been thinking about since that experience because, like I said, it sounds very simple, but for me, this was like a really shocking experience. And it really made me think that I need to really embrace the role that I have, that I can be useful for God at this time in my life. I won't always be able to do these kind of things. But I can do it now, and it's useful now, and it's meaningful now, and it allows for greater things to happen now. So it's something to really reflect on, at least for me. It's important for us to remember that we may not necessarily get the results that we expect to get for the effort that we put in. But we can't get too caught up in that, because that can easily turn into resentment. That what I worked so hard for, what I sacrificed for, what I gave my life for, it doesn't look like what I thought it would look like. I mean, that happens a lot, especially in a life of faith. So it's important that we seek for maybe what God is doing in the circumstances, not so much what I personally expected to see happen. This is a quote from our founder. He said, "God has been seeking to recover his relationship with fallen human beings and the lost ideal garden. Through the course of restoration, he is striving to rebuild the garden where once, prior to the fall, he joyfully related to Adam and Eve. From that state of joy, he wants to create and build a world through which he can realize his ideal. This is the history of the providence of salvation that God has been leading. And this is the history of restoration we must pass through. Therefore, as you go through the course of restoration, surrender yourself to the ways of heaven. Examine yourself objectively from the standpoint, and then reflect seriously about where you stand and the situations in which you struggle. God established religions out of his love. It is through religions that God has been trying to teach human beings their proper position and give them direction. Throughout history, God has been looking for us, seeking, through the path of religion and based on our faith, to bring us back to him." So of course, just being used by God and being useful is not the goal that we should be striving for in our life, per se. Just like in any real relationship, even in a conversation where two people are talking, it comes down to a genuine desire to love and to be loved. We do for God. We strive to be useful for God. We strive to give back to God, not because it's good to be useful, because it's fulfilling, but because of what God has done for us. Because it's a way of giving back. It's a way of returning love. It's a way of returning beauty. And the universe revolves around giving and receiving love and giving and receiving beauty. It's kind of like when we have a loved one, and it's natural, and that we feel loved by that person, whether it's a parent, a friend, a mentor. And we go to them and we naturally say, "What can I do for you? How can I be of service? How can I help you?" And so it really isn't supposed to be like this give and take kind of thing. It's more about a natural process of how real relationships work. And if we're in a real relationship with God and we feel that God has touched my life in some way, and the things that I have in my life that I really value more than anything else are really because of God's presence in my life or God's intervention in my life, it's easy to lose sight of that over time. But I have a natural desire to want to give something back, then we don't need to be fearful of how God may want to use us. In fact, in my experience, when we are able to be in a position to be used by God in some way, because God loves us, we benefit, but also because God is not going to ask us or desire for us to do anything that's stupid or pointless or meaningless. It will benefit something that's important to God. It will benefit a person in my life. It will benefit society, or whatever it is. I mean, it looks different for each person, I recognize. So I'd like to finish by reading one final quote. The essence of love is to cast aside any thought of having others live for oneself. It is to live for the sake of others and give for the whole. Love gives, but then forgets even the fact that it has given and continues to give without ceasing. This is a love that gives in joy. It is a heart that a mother feels when she takes her infant in her arms and lets it feed from her breast. Parents will suffer for their children until it seems their bones are going to melt away, yet they never feel that the work was difficult. That is how much they love their children, and this true love begins with God and comes to us from God. Please join me in prayer. Dearest Heavenly Parent, good morning. I thank you for each person who came here this morning, and I'm grateful for the message, for this time of fellowship and singing, reflection. Heavenly Parent, we can so easily forget about the blessings in our life, especially when we are dealing with challenges and difficulties that seem so big. But Heavenly Parent, we never want to lose sight of you. And we never want to lose sight of your devotion to us and to your children all over this world. We don't want to take for granted that you will never forsake us, Heavenly Parent. And in our lives, one way or another, I pray that we can find some way to return that gratitude, the beauty, and the love that you have invested into us back to you somehow. And even if it doesn't exactly look the way that we thought it would, Heavenly Parent, I pray that we can embrace those things, that we can find gratitude for them, we can find joy in them, and also seek for your blessing and your lessons and the direction that you are trying to guide each and every one of us in our life, Heavenly Parent. I know that deep down within each single person here, we all have the desire to be used by you and to be of use to you. We all want to live a life where we know it mattered and it made an impact and an impression in your heart. So we just pray that regardless of where we are all at this morning, that you can guide us in that common purpose that we all have to want to give love back to you. And I thank you now for this prayer in my name, Michael Adonia Hendrick, a blessed family. Amen and adieu. Thank you.